everybody, and welcome to A Better You, your one-stop shop for everything self-improvement, self-discovery and self-care. Today I'm here to talk to you about different language learning hacks. So simple things that might make it quicker, easier, more efficient to learn your target language. My first hack is to start learning images as opposed to the translations when you're learning new words in your target language. So for example, instead of learning that şemsiye in Turkish is umbrella, actually look at umbrella and think şemsiye. By learning images as opposed to the translations, you will be able to progress to a more advanced level in an easy way because you're not having to do that internal translation to get to that word. Another simple but useful hack is to make sure that you are practicing daily. However, another hack on top of that is that not all practicing has to be active kind of learning. You can just put on a TV show, you can put on music in the background, so do make the most of those passive learning opportunities. Try to learn the 1000 most common words first, and what we are going to do on the channel is to put a list of around 60 or 70 words that are the most useful first words or phrases to learn, so do watch out for that in the future. By focusing in on the ones that are used most often, you can really focus on making sure that when you use the language, you'll be able to speak most sentences, you'll be able to get yourself to a conversational type of level earlier in your journey. Try to use content that you actually enjoy. So for example, you could get your favourite book into your target language. By using tools that you actually enjoy, you'll be more engaged in the language learning. It will be less of a chore to do it, especially on that daily basis that we already mentioned. When you are learning your language, a great technique to use is spaced repetition. And this is when you learn a new word or phrase, make sure that you do it and then repeat it at an appropriate time point. There's loads of different apps that do this. For example, LinkU can help you with this. And essentially this means that you hear the word, if you don't know the word, it will repeat that word back to you at a later date and test you on it. So that just at the moment where you're about to forget it, you're prompted on it, and it really helps those words to stick longer term. You should try to learn languages a little bit before bed. Not only does this make for some interesting dreams where you try to use your languages, and trust me, I've had those ones, but it also helps it to stay fresh in your mind, and it helps to stick better because the time when you sleep is the time when your brain really processes information, and so it really helps to really deep set it into your brain and help you to learn that information. You could find a book that you love. You could also find TV or a musician that you love in the target language. It makes it so much easier if you can find that one show or that one musician. It makes it a lot more easy to learn because if you're loving the song anyway, you're more willing to listen to it more often. If you're loving a show, if you're gripped by a show, it becomes a lot easier to rewatch it and to really get those words grounded in your mind. When you're learning a language, you should know why you're learning it. So when you pick a language, don't just pick a random language. Pick something where you like the culture, where you intend to travel there. Know your why and make sure that why is extremely strong and motivating for you, because otherwise you will trip up. An example of this, Turkish. I visit Turkey often. I like to know a little of the language where I'm visiting, and as I've got better with my Turkish when we visited, I've got more comments, so it's prompted me to want to learn more and to get to that more fluent level. Dutch, I have a friend who lives in the Netherlands, and so again it gives me kind of that motivation to learn. I have to admit, French and German, I didn't really have those reasons in place. It was just because I'd already learned a bit at high school, and it's harder to learn them as a result, so definitely do have that reason in place. On the passive learning front, a great way to do this is to change your phone into your target language. And you could also, if you categorize your phone on the different app collections, as it were, then you could name those categories with your target language as well. Just seeing some of those on a daily basis will help those words to really drive into place. And again, it's just easy learning opportunities that you don't really have to think about and that you don't have to take that extra time. When you're having conversations in your day-to-day life, try to translate them in your head or out loud. Try to translate songs when you're listening to them. These will give you opportunities to test how well you know the language. It will give you opportunities to test new phrases and to learn new phrases. And especially for the conversation front, these are things that you are using right now in your current language. So it's likely that you will be able to use them in your target language as well. And so it's useful sentences. So definitely do look to translate conversations. On a similar note, try to have fake conversations with yourself. So if you have friends that you might see in a particular country, try to think about what you talk about, have that conversation in your head. And if you don't know something, look it up and memorize it. And again, these are those more useful sentences that actually really bring the language to life for you and that make it motivating to learn that language. When you are learning any new phrases, make sure that you also learn the phrases in different tenses and with different personal pronouns. And the reason you do that is because it really helps to drive the grammar home in a more tangible way, where you're not having to physically go out of your way to learn the grammar. You start to see it more often in those target sentences and see how it plays out. This is a more natural way to learn the grammar. It's less challenging to learn the grammar this way, so it's definitely worth going down that route. It's also worth learning different variants of phrases. So for example, if you are going to learn the word flower, then you might also like to learn things like bloom or rose or specific subspecies of flowers. By learning them together, it just helps to really concrete that image in your mind and to connect those words together, so that as you're building up that language map in your mind, it becomes easier to do so because you're learning them together in the first. This next hack is one that my daughter actually uses to learn English, her native language, and it's one that they use at schools throughout the early school life. They will retell fairy tales and have the children retell fairy tales in a more and more complex way. By doing this in your target language, again, you'll have those same opportunities. You already know the stories well, you already know the basics of those stories, so you can start building them up and slowly extend your capabilities to tell them in more creative ways, to tell them with better adjectives, to tell them in more detail. From a listening perspective, it's definitely worth using, where it's available on the app or system that you're using, to start off with very slow-paced content and slowly speed up content that you're used to further up and up, so that you can get used to people speaking more quickly. When a language is your native language, you do tend to speak more quickly. Certainly I do. And by slowly being able to pick up that pace, slowly being able to increase how well you can listen to quicker and quicker paced content, you should be able to get to that fluent listening stage. And from a fluency perspective, it's worth trying to learn a few basic jokes in your target language and to learn cultural references. So you can learn cultural references from the internet, you can look for memes in your target language, or you could learn this through TV, you could research the culture and the history. You kind of need to know the cultural phrases because these can be thrown into conversations, they can be casually used when you're speaking to natives, and to really demonstrate fluency, it's a core requirement to understand those cultural references. To progress towards fluency, you should use multiple different methods. So for example, you should be reading, you should be writing, you should be doing apps, you should be doing memorization, you should be doing listening exercises, watching things. Try to really immerse yourself, because the more ways that's going in, again, the more solid that map of language in your mind is. A particular hack to learning something in a stronger way is to actually absorb the language and absorb the lessons around the language, and then to teach it to somebody else. So if you have a friend who would also like to learn the language but is newer to it than you are, then you might want to teach that friend, or as you advance in your language learning journey, you might want to become a language tutor. This will not only help your tutee, but it will help you as well to really concrete in those messages for yourself. Similar to the point earlier on around cultural references, to make yourself sound more native in tone, you should also learn slang. Again, social media is a great way to do this. It's harder to find slang, so if you're living in the country, that's great, and that's obviously the easiest way to pick up slang. But if not, follow loads of social media accounts and you should be able to pick that up that way instead. Again, as you advance more, make sure that you know those transitions. This also helps as you're starting to read in the language, because the transitions will be often in the language, and so if you know them, you can kind of understand that you can move past them quite quickly. So for example, so, and, but, because, they're, like, these are all kind of those, you know, words that we use in our language in a casual way, and that might connect different phrases, but don't really have a lot of meaning for the phrase. They're useful to know, they're useful to use when you're speaking the language, and they will certainly make you sound more fluent. They're also useful to know because if you do know them, then when you hear them, you know you can kind of, to some extent, ignore the word and move on to the more important words like your verbs, your nouns, your adjectives that really carry the meaning of a sentence. And my final two hacks, which are probably the most frustrating hacks: consistency is absolutely everything with learning languages. It's important just to not give up, just to keep going, just to do a little bit each day, and you will get there. And very related, practice, practice, practice. So hopefully these language learning tips have been helpful for you, and hopefully you can use them in your language learning journey. Do let us know down in the comments if you have any of your own hacks that will be useful for people to know. And please also let us know any slang in your language to help people who might be learning your language to learn that as well. Thank you very much for watching. Please do like the video and do subscribe for more language learning content. Thank you.